welcome back to another edition of Inside Great Lakes Sailing. My name is Greg Normand. You get a chance this week to cover the Trans-Superior Sail Race, which begins in Sault Ste. Marie, ends in Duluth, Minnesota, and it is sponsored by the Duluth Yacht Club. We get a chance to check in with Stacy McKenzie and with Dave Johnson, who are both the race directors. Stacy is the current Vice Commodore of the Duluth Yacht Club. Dave Johnson is a former Yacht Club Commodore, and we'll talk a little bit about the race and his activities as it relates to the race. We also got a chance to talk with the second place finisher, Chuck Beyer, out of Bayview on Arctos. And I think the coolest part is we got a chance to spend some time with Keith Strauber, who won the overall Barthel Trophy. I'm sure I got that name mixed up. We'll try to get it for you the correct way. But it's a traveling trophy that if you're the overall winner of all three races as a combined time and places, and there's a part of the story that I think you'll find interesting. He had a chance to sail the Trans-Superior with three of his daughters, and I think even he was a little surprised at the end when he went to the award ceremony to get the honor. There are times in the sport of sailing, and for that matter, the times of competition, that just sort of make the day. Keith's story was something that was very touching to the heart, and I think you'll enjoy his rendition, and I think maybe one of the best stories of the season so far. So we'll be back with Dave and with Stacy in a couple of seconds talking about the Trans-Superior. Welcome back. We're lucky enough to have Dave Johnson and Stacy McKenzie with us from the Duluth Yacht Club, both race directors in the Trans-Superior, which just concluded here in the last week. First of all, I appreciate you coming aboard. I know, Dave, you're a former Commodore at Duluth, and Stacy, you're the current Vice Commodore. Am I correct?
Correct. Yep.
The picture behind me tells 1,000 words. I believe that Stripe's coming across the line for the first time this past week. Just talk a little bit about the race, and then we'll kind of get into some discussions. It was a very successful race, I think, don't you?
Sure, I can go first. We had 41 boats that took the line, and my joke has been 39 of them crossed the line and only 2 sank. So, but in all seriousness, just 2 needed to turn around for different reasons. Family emergency for one, some electrical problems for the other. But I think as race organizers, that was the biggest thing, was to get every boat that started here in Duluth safely and across the line. How about you, Stacy? What kind of stuck out for you?
Yeah, I agree. I think that after the last 18 months with the pandemic, just the excitement that everyone brought to the start line, to have that many boats, we had a record number of boats sign up. Obviously, we had a few drop last minute just for different reasons. But just to see the excitement and the energy that everyone brought to the start line, and to see that pride as everyone crossed the finish line, those are the two big highlights for me. I
saw something, this is a really minor point, but I saw something on one of the flyers that you guys had the best awards party on the lakes. And I find it interesting because Chicago had the same, and so did Bayview. So apparently everybody claims they have the best party on the lakes, but I can tell you, you have the best harbor and the best view of anybody in the lakes. And I think that's something coming into Duluth with the bridge and all that's there. I think it's a pretty spectacular area.
Yeah, I'm not so sure that really crept in because of Dave or myself or Stacy about the best party. I think really what we can lay claim to is that maybe we're the friendliest race on the Great Lakes. I think we really put a lot of time and effort and energy into being accommodating and friendly and outgoing. And I really think that's our niche instead of the best party.
Stacy, is it geography that you only run every 2 years just because of it being farther north?
I think it may be just the amount of work that goes into it, and typically there's only a couple of us that are doing all the work. I think if we had to do it every 2 years, we'd run a little bit there.
Does it require you guys to have somebody over in St. Louis, Sault Ste. Marie to start the race, I'm assuming?
Yep. So this year, myself and John Velez, who did a lot of our scoring, went over to Sault Ste. Marie to do the registration, skippers meetings, and see the boats across the start line. John then jumped on another boat before he started across the start line. He jumped on another boat and raced back to Duluth. Dave stuck back in Duluth and got everything sort of set up with our headquarters here. Lots of moving parts here with docking, logistics, headquarters setup, things like that. So we kind of split the task this year, and it worked out pretty well.
I did a thing on Google, and it turns out that from Sault Ste. Marie to Duluth, if you leave Detroit, you're almost to Atlanta, Georgia, in terms of distance, which I thought was remarkable. It's just you're sort of in the southern Tennessee area, just to give people an understanding of just how far it is across the lake.
Mhm.
You have a set of circumstances on Lake Superior that obviously that I don't think they have on Michigan or Huron. It's a horizontal lake, so that changes the parameter for weather. But what is the allure about the lake and the race? I understand it's a friendly race, but what's the allure if I were not familiar with the actual race? What is it? Why would I want to come up there?
I think it's just the challenge of Lake Superior. You know, the average year-round temperature on Lake Superior is 40 degrees. Lake Superior has its own weather system. The winds that the storm might come and hit Lake Superior and bounce right off of it, or it might come across it depending on how the lake is feeling that day. And I think it's the cold. I think it's the distance away from from metro areas, and I think it's the wildness of it. Lake Superior is just wild. It's just a wild lake, and when it gets up and gets going, when the winds really start to blow, it's awe-inspiring and terrifying at the same time.
Does that reputation hurt then a little bit, maybe too?
I think it does a little bit. I think it also inspires. I think people kind of see it as one of the greatest challenges to do this race. But yeah, I think that there are some people who kind of shy away from it. You know, we had one comment that said, "Well, you know, this year the race didn't really live up to our expectations. We weren't shoveling snow off the foredeck by the time we crossed the finish line." So I think it does have a reputation for being typically pretty cold and unfriendly. But it's the conditions this year was great. Other than the fog, it was warm and pretty accommodating.
It was I think a slower race. We noticed a number of times on the track, we were watching boats that were, 2-3 knots, especially up around the Keweenaw. So part of that was probably reminiscent of the Chicago Mac this year, where you had one boat that was 9 or 10 hours because it, caught an early breeze. And there were some folks that were literally hours that were a knot and a half, two knots. If you're going 300 miles and you're sitting on a boat in the back of it and you're going a knot and a half, you get, even if you're a cruiser, you get, little anxious to keep the thing moving. So weather didn't help, I don't think, overall, but I think that's also something that, just comes with the territory.
Right.
I was impressed at one point in time. We had boats spread out from Silver Bay all the way to the tip of the peninsula. It made the boats arriving and docking actually very easy because we had lots of time to plan and to move things around. But I think as far as just I don't know, race logistics, it was an interesting phenomenon.
You had several single-handed racers in this, and I look behind me and I see the boat striped at 70 feet long. It's got 15, 18, whatever crew on it. To me, the guys you got to have some admiration for are the singles and the double-handed guys, because now we're again with reputation. John Walton a couple of years ago from our club won the single-handed on an Express 27, and I had a chance to talk to him about that. And he would tell you that the apprehension before the race, and he's done all the other single-handed Great Lakes races, this one was a different animal for him in terms of just the preparation. But I get great admiration for the guys who get on Lake Superior and going that far on a single boat. Do they get special recognition at the party for being by themselves?
We've got obviously we've got a separate class for them. We try to give a shout out to everyone, specifically who had done it, whether they're, were one of the first through third boats, give them all a shout out because it's a huge undertaking to do by yourself. One that, I have mixed feelings about it. Do I ever want to do something like that? Or is that just completely crazy? So yeah, but no, we try to take care of our.
At one point in time, we had 6 Olsen 30s signed up, and we were really excited. We made a separate Olsen 30 class. And even though 2 of them dropped out and 2 that were potentially going to come to make it a fleet of 8 weren't able to due to border issues and things like that, we still kept the Olsen 30s in their own class just to recognize what a heroic, what a huge effort that is to do it on your own. Yeah, they get a lot of love from us for that.
A lot of the boats that are Mackinac obviously come north, and just talk briefly that it's not as difficult to get through the locks with a sailboat, even a smaller one. Just kind of talk through the idea that if you're thinking about coming, I've heard a number of people say, well, it's just too much hassle to deal with the locks and having to go through all the rest of it, but I don't think it's as hard as people think.
No, we have at 8 a.m. and 9 a.m. So the smaller, slower boats will walk through at 8, bigger boats at 9 o'clock. And all it is, if you're one of the first ones in there, they've got line or deep, at least at the 9 o'clock walkthrough. But it's just like anything else, kind of joining a flotilla or whatever. You just pull up along someone else, and it's real simple.
To both of you, the most rewarding and the most, and I won't say difficult, but the most challenging. What's the most challenging in terms of being race directors, and what's the thing that keeps you up at night?
I think this year, I mean, specifically this year for me, it was everything with COVID-19 and not having any idea. You know, you don't know what to plan for. You don't know what's going to be allowed. We wanted to make sure this was a safe event. So you kind of have to go through the mindset of plan for what you want to do and then have contingencies based on how things might be changing at that time. And yeah, that to me was probably the most challenging thing. The thing that kind of kept me up is how do we do this? How do we pull it off safely?
What made you happy?
Like I said,
smiling faces.
Yeah, it is. Seeing everybody, like I said, the excitement at the start of the race, but really afterwards, seeing everybody at the awards parties and everyone just bucket list race for them, and to be able to facilitate that and make that bucket list dream come true, it's really rewarding.
Dave, how about you?
I collected stories this year. I was sitting in my little trailer at the docking headquarters, and every time a sailor or skipper would come by to ask a question or get the access to the bathroom key or whatever, I would say, wait, before I give you that key, you have to tell me a story. And I was really doing what you were doing, Greg, but without recording it. And it was just collecting those stories and hearing the impact that the race had. There was one instance where a gentleman actually broke into tears and was describing how he hadn't been with his brother for a year and a half, and he had the whole length of the race to just reconnect with his brother and just to sit on the rail and share stories and talk and strategize. And it brought this big lumberjack, tough looking guy just to tears just to have that opportunity. And I think that's what did it for me. That was the thing that made every single hour that we spent on Zoom and on the phone and typing into the computer, it made every single one of those minutes worthwhile to know that we created that opportunity for those things to happen. And that's just one story out of, I don't know, 50 that I might have collected. And they were all kind of had that theme of connection and challenge and being able to live in the moment. Set down that iPad, set down that phone, and just be in the moment on something that's really, really cool to do. What kept me up at night? Probably just the safety of the crew. Like we said, it's an unpredictable lake. It's a challenging lake, and we definitely don't want anyone to be lost or to be hurt in any way, shape, or form. And what gave me some peace and some comfort, the Coast Guard was hand to hand with us this year. They were so good at working with us, along with a big shout out to the National Weather Service, both in Marquette and Duluth and in Gaylord. They gave us daily weather briefings. They were watching our sailors. I know that they had the YB tracking up in their offices, and they would call and they would say, Ginger K looks like she's going backwards, talk to us about this, tell us more. And we got to kind of work together with them. And so that brought that level of concern and anxiety way down to have those professionals, the Coast Guard and the Weather Service right on our side.
Dave, you mentioned you're a Nordic coach, ski coach, and I always make the analogy that if you've coached and you've never officiated, to me, officiating to high school or college sports is much like race committee would be to racers. At some point, if you've raced your whole life and you've never been on a race committee, you should either become one, or if you have a comment, keep your mouth shut. Because until you do the job, you don't realize what goes into it. And I know my boat a couple of times, being a new guy at a yacht club about 5 years ago, kept being asked to be a committee boat. And I didn't understand what it meant. I had to sit all day on the front of the boat, anchored, bouncing up and down. That said, but I think I think they all need a nod of thanks for all the work that goes into some kind of race like this. Because the winner, let's talk a little bit about, I really love trophies. And I'm going to say this wrong again, It's not
Barthel.
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 Every 2 years, I didn't even realize until this race that there's a Great Lakes Sailing Union that oversees the lake associations, which is something that I want to follow up with a story because I think it's something that would be very interesting. But in 2002, now the Barthel, am I saying it right?
Barthel.
Barthel.
Yeah.
The trophy. In 2002, there was a discussion. This is a trophy that started being given out in 1933 and has a great history. One of the things we found out in an earlier show with the Queen's Cup is that the Stanley Cup, is legendary that it's the oldest trophy in North America. It turns out it's not even the oldest trophy in the Great Lakes based on sailing. But the trophy was passed around for a bunch of places, including here at Grosse Pointe at one point. But the trophy is given through the lake associations, both Huron, Michigan, and Superior. Of the 3 races, it's given to the best overall finish for a racer. I think in 2019, it was given to Bruce Akins from Talisman, if I'm not mistaken. So talk about the trophy, and then obviously who won it this year.
I'd love to talk a little bit about the Barthel Trophy. It Paula Hall and Scott Spaeth worked together in, I think it was the 2005, wasn't it, Stacy? 2005. Yep. To take that trophy. In the past, it was competed by, you'd send a team from Lake Michigan, you'd send a team from, Superior, you'd send a team from Huron, and they would go head to head on some sort of match racing or something like that. And they came up with this brilliant idea to have it be the overall trophy for doing the Chicago Mac, the Bayview Mac, and the Trans Superior, and then obviously competing for it every other year. And that the trophy was when I came upon it, or when Stacy and I started doing it, we saw that as a vehicle to really build excitement about getting people to do all 3 races and to get up here to Lake Superior. This year we had the most number of boats that I think we've ever had competing for the trophy. There were 8 boats that were in the mix for trying to go for it, all the way from J35 up to like Stripes, the 70 footers. And so there's quite a wide range of crews and speeds. And this year, Papa Gaucho from the Duluth Yacht Club overtook Stripes by just an hour and a little bit of change, hour and 20 minutes.
Cool.
Over 900 miles of racing.
Right.
And ended up beating, winning the Barthel Trophy.
But that's based on the handicap, correct?
Yep. What we did is I would total up the elapsed time for all 3 races, and then also the corrected time for all 3 races, add them all together, and that was the hour and a half difference was on corrected time. What's
it like to win it at home? That's pretty cool.
First time it's happened, right?
Yeah, first time. And Stacy, talk a little bit about Keith at the awards ceremony, Keith Strauber, the skipper.
Keith's been, obviously he's been a pillar of the Duluth Yacht Club for years and years and years. And he mentioned that he doesn't know how many more of these, long distance races he has left in him. So he said, you know what, we're going to do all 3 of them. So we did all 3 races, got his best crew together, including all 3 of his daughters. And he was just absolutely overcome with emotion at the awards party, just knowing what he had accomplished and to have his family involved and with him, the entire way. It was a really, really cool, proud moment for, I think, all of us at the Duluth Yacht Club, knowing how hard that they've worked and how successful they've been in sailing, and to kind of have that one, take that final box of winning the Barthel Trophy for the Duluth Yacht Club was really cool.
Plus, I'm guessing at the bar at the Duluth Yacht Club, or if you have one, or in the local watering hole that you guys all frequent, I'm sure it cost them a couple extra bucks having won the race at home. That's got to be part of that discussion.
Well, he
received was that huge bottle of wine.
Yep.
And what did he do with that? He opened it up after the awards ceremony.
Yep, on Thursday night after the awards party, we were River Road Winery was one of our sponsors, and they donated a 5-liter bottle of their reserve Pinot Noir, and so he brought it, and he said, "Everyone, at 9:30 or whatever, he goes, come over to Papa Gaucho. We're going to open it up, and everyone gets a glass." So it was a really cool way to share that victory with everyone.
Maybe at some point you give me some contact information. I'd love to talk to him. I think it would be a really cool interview.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah.
Last,
that would-
just curious, just talk. Most of us don't get a chance to get to Western Lake Superior. And besides having Trans-Superior having the best name of the three races, I just think the name is just really cool. There's, again, no scientific evidence, just a sort of editorial comment. What's it like sailing in the western part of Lake Superior? This, for us that don't know.
I think it's a real mixed bag depending on what direction the wind's blowing.
Right. When does season typically start for you guys? End of May?
End of May, if we're lucky. I think middle of May is typically when our first spring series and series race is scheduled. I probably 8 out of 10 times that one gets canceled or postponed just because of conditions. Yeah, typically end of May through mid-September is when we wrap up.
With all of the mountains around it and mountains, hills, rolling, terrain. It's I've been there again in the wintertime when there's lots of snow on the ground, but Duluth is a really cool town, and it's got a college. It's got great Division I hockey. And I think if you've not been there, maybe you see 30 below zero in the middle of January, but it's a cool town. If you've never been there, you should take the opportunity to spend some time there. So
Absolutely.
I've never really sailed anywhere but Lake Superior. I've sailed a little bit on Michigan, a little bit on Huron, but that's really, I took up sailing when I got here out of the Air Force, and I couldn't imagine sailing anywhere warm. I actually associate sailing as a little bit of a cool weather sport and a cold water sport. And so for me, it feels like home. But then again, I'm a Nordic ski coach, and I know how to dress for the weather.
right.
And I think that's really, really the issue. Is just how do you prepare? How do you dress? What's your mind frame? And once you've been out and in the middle of Lake Superior on a bluebird day, like today would be, there's nothing finer.
Yeah,
One
I
thing-
think the other, I was
No, go
gonna say that I think with one of the coolest things when I did the trans, we had great weather, and to be out there in the middle of Lake Superior off the Keweenaw, in the middle of nowhere, the star shows that you get and the Northern Lights, that was such a cool experience. And I was so sad that this year, I think they said that they had maybe 2 or 3 hours of decent stars, and that was it. But if you can time it right, you end up with luck on your side, it can be a really spectacular night sailing out there.
Well, between Whitefish Point and the top of the Keweenaw, there's not a lot in between those two areas. So you're really in a part of the world that, not a lot of traffic is seen.
Yeah.
It's a great place. It's just a great place to be. Just briefly talk about the Duluth Yacht Club. How many members? Just curious.
Oh, I should know this.
We're probably in the 100 to 150 range.
I think we're closer to 200 actually.
Oh, really? Yep.
So upper hundreds. Yeah. Maybe around 180.
What I was going to ask before the question about the Duluth Yacht Club, you guys did something on your website, which I thought was cool. Prior to the race, and I think pretty much to like April, May, and June, you actually did some podcasts with some experts in various.
Yep.
Talk about that, because I think that's something that for these other racers, simple things like, man overboard drills and some of the rest of it. You had some guys talking about what it's like to get set up for a long distance race, and some experts and the rest of it. So how did that come about? And maybe explain it so somebody might consider it for other races.
That kind of came up. We had talked about in the past for the Duluth Yacht Club, we've done some speaker series, just kind of in the spring, getting people ready to prep their boats, for the spring, getting boats in the water. And we kind of thought, well, why can't we expand that? And, people who haven't been here, our first speaker was Eric Thomas, who's a kind of a local legend around here. We're just like, let people know, what to expect. What are the logistics of getting there? How do you prepare for it? Why is it different from the other races? So we had that. And then we had Stuart McLaughlin kind of talking about boat prep, how you prepare your boat for long distance racing, safety and reliability checks, things like that. We had Matt Wackowitz, who talked about tactical navigation. He was a tactical navigator for the Volvo and the America's Cup Series, and he was on El Mastro. But he brought it down more to a level of, if you don't have a dedicated navigator on your boat, how do you manage keeping an eye on things and making decisions when you're also doing everything else, especially if you're a solo guy, everything's on you. So we had Matt speak, and then we had folks from the National Weather Service, just talking more about some of the local conditions and what they can maybe expect to see in early August in terms of weather patterns in the past. And then in August coming up, we've got another speaker, Sharon Ferris-Choate, who is a New Zealand Olympian sailor. She also sailed on the maiden two voyage, set 4 world records on the round the world circumnavigation attempt there. She's just going to talk about women in sailing. I think it's really important to empower women and empower the men around them to really, build them up in the sport, because we do have quite a few women in sailing. I know for myself, when I got going, I thought, I've sailed for years, but I don't think I'm good enough to be a racer. I don't think I have that level of skill or ability. And if I would have had someone like her, kind of cheering me on and having, people have her bring the awareness to the crews and say, this is how you empower and build these people up. And it doesn't even have to be women, it's just any new crew member. Because that's all we want to do. We want to grow the sport and find ways to make sure that we aren't being exclusive of anybody, and just giving people the tools that they need to succeed.
We've had the good fortune of interviewing Don Riley and Anna Tunnicliffe, who's the only Olympic gold medal winner. And we've had a number of just unbelievable women that have sailed and have had great, careers. So it's been pretty fun. Well, listen, I appreciate your time. I can't tell you how much it's been enjoyable to talk to you about the race. And I guess the next time, if we're still doing this show to promote junior sailing in our area, hopefully we'll talk to you guys in 2023.
2023. Can we try out a tagline on you that Stacy came up with?
Sure.
Yeah. 2023 Trans Superior. Too far away, too good to miss.
Okay, Dave, that's going under your name, just so you know, as part of the tag. If you're watching this, guys, you'll see the Dave's moniker, the paradigm right underneath it. I think that's fabulous. Guys, thanks so much for your time.
Really appreciate being here, Greg.
Yeah, thanks so much, Greg.
That was Dave Johnson and Stacy McKenzie talking a little bit about the Duluth Yacht Club sailing on Western Lake Superior and kind of what goes into the place, a little bit about the race, and just kind of wrapping up a race that happens every 2 years. So the next time we talk about the Trans Superior will be 2023. Coming up is Keith Strauber, and Keith's going to talk about winning the overall trophy from the Great Lakes Sailing Union. And I think you're going to be very touched by his story and his interview. And at 69, he had a chance to sail with his daughters to win this race. And not only was it important to him, but he was part of the Duluth Yacht Club. So it's kind of nice to see him winning on home turf. We're talking with Keith Strauber, who is the Barthel Trophy winner for the 3-race Chicago to Mac, Bayview to Mac, and the Trans Superior race. The boat behind me is Stripes by Bill Martin, and you edged him out. And here's the cool part of the whole thing. The race ended in Duluth, and you're from Duluth, and I believe you're the first winner of that trophy, which has been part of this competition since 2002, but has quite a history going all the way back to 1933. So first of all, congratulations, and maybe talk a little bit about the race and what the trophy means.
Well, the trophy means, it means a lot more to, hometown boy. And to have done it on a 35-foot boat when, all the previous winners have been, the bigger boats. And it's not one race, it's 3 races, and had different crew for each of the races and different numbers of crew for each of the races. And the interesting part is that we never won our class in any of the races. But when you put down the old overall numbers compared to everybody else, we came out on top. And I've raced on Stripes before with Bill Martin a number of times, and they are very, very good friends. And Bill is probably the biggest reason we have the number of boats we have in the race today, because he's backed it for years.
We've talked a little bit with Dave and Stacy, the race directors, about every other year. It had 41 boats this year. Typically, that's a pretty high number. I think that's the most he said they'd ever raced. When you're getting a couple of hundred in the other MAC races, geography is part of that. But don't you think some of the sailors that don't sail this race, from everything I've been talking to, they're missing out, aren't they?
Oh, it's it's a beautiful race. The people that do come usually come back. And, that's example of Bill Martin, who, was second, and Talisman, who was third. And yeah, the boats that come here have heard horror stories about the race, about upwind and cold and big waves. And the truth is, most of the time it's a downwind race and fairly mild conditions. And you can put your cup over the side and drink the water right out of the lake and be totally safe. And beautiful country.
Now you raced the Chicago Mac and the Bayview Mac. The Chicago Mac was a little bit like the Trans-Superior race, and it was slow. And you obviously had a chance to race in maybe what turned out to be the most perfect conditions in the Bayview to Mac race, with all kinds of record times for all kind of classes.
Yes.
Given your druthers, you'd rather have a lot of good air than no air. Was it tough with this race, with being a little bit slow?
Well, a little bit, but we ran into a real slow spot in the Chicago Mac. We were 12 miles ahead of the next boat in our class, and it was a case of being too far ahead. And a number of guys behind us made a left turn and went 90 degrees to the race course to get out in the lake. And we thought we wouldn't be that drastic, and we turned up 20 degrees and headed out in the lake to kind of merge with them should anything happen. We got about a third of the way out and we stopped, and next time we moved, those three boats were 17 miles ahead of us.
Yeah.
So yeah.
What kind of 35 are you on?
It's a J35.
Okay.
An old dog, but good boat.
You're a lifelong sailor?
Started when I was 23, got picked up in a bar by the drummer in the band. I was a locomotive engineer, and I was laid off from work and filling in some money. And the drummer in the band asked me if I'd go sail with him. And he had a San Juan 24. Went out racing on a Wednesday night. Went out with him the next Wednesday night. My brother was going to law school in Chicago, and he was home the following weekend. We raced with another guy, and my brother and I went out and bought a brand new CNC 25, having me race 3 times, him once, and his wife never, and I wasn't married at the time. So
I've been reported to me that part of your crew for the Trans-Superior race was your daughters?
Yes.
Explain that one. And I also know from seeing some pictures that you got a little emotional at the award ceremony, which I think is the coolest part of the story. So talk about what it's like to win the race at home and your daughter's on board.
Well, my daughters primarily drove the fact that we did the whole series. For various circumstances, they were both home. They wanted to go do this. And I thought to myself, at 69 years old, how many of these do I have left? And if my kids actually want to do them with me, I better make it happen. So we started the planning, and I got out the checkbook, and and we went racing. And my youngest daughter, who had just not long ago completed a 120-day voyage on a semester educational vessel, she ended up getting a job at a marina, so she missed the first two races, but was along for the Trans. And my middle daughter was with for the whole thing, and she told me at the end of the second race, she said, "Dad, you know what? I've gotten to know you more in 2 weeks than I ever knew you when you were a locomotive engineer and on call 24 hours a day." And it actually was a really wonderful moment.
You think they get it?
You think they get it?
Yeah.
Oh, they get it, especially after these races. Yeah. And I've got crew to die for, people who are very good and stick with me no matter what, whether I holler at them at the boat or not. They keep coming back. And
but they're not your daughters.
They're not my daughters.
Did your daughters know you were are you an emotional guy? And from the emotion from the ceremony, were they surprised by that?
I don't think so. I'm a pretty caring person, and yeah, I don't think that surprised them, but I think it made them a little teary too.
The story made my summer. Absolutely made my summer. Stacy was talking about it and she was getting choked up talking about it, which will be later. If you watch the show, you'll see that it's in that thing. I think winning at home, beating Stripes. And again, I know Bill's a friend of yours, but I'm a Spartan and he's not. So I've always got to get the dig in. And I spent a lot of time in the UP. My family's from the Marquette area, so I know Lake Superior pretty well. And I just think that just to get a chance to talk to you is pretty cool. It's just one of the questions I was going to ask you though, to campaign a 35 like that all over the lakes, who's your delivery committee? Was that you part of that as you as well?
Me and my daughter and Lars Benson and a couple other crew. We raced, we left Duluth on July 1 and went to Bayfield, Wisconsin for Bayfield Race Week. When that got over on Friday the 9th, we departed from Bayfield and did a 6-day forced to delivery Chicago. We spent 4 hours at a dock in Detour having a little nap in that entire time and pulled into Chicago. The crew shows up and we're off to do the Chicago Mac race, and then you get to the top of the lake and a day later you're heading for Port Huron to do the Bayview, and a couple days after getting there you're racing back to Sault Ste. Marie and ready for the Trans Superior. So it's a push.
After all that traveling and all that sailing, though, the upside to it is that when you win this race, you're home.
Yes.
There's a lot of those guys that are having to take their boats back.
Exactly.
They had to do the opposite. You did it early. They did it late. So it just, it works out. I don't think this is a fair question, but I got to ask, do you have a favorite of the 3 races?
Well, the Trans Superior will always be the home favorite because I've done 21 of those, and that's more than anybody in history.
Okay.
Chewbacca, who has 18. I think most of the primary guys on Stripes probably have 12 or 13. It's a bunch. I do like both the other races. We've won our division in the Bayview Mac previously, and I finished 3rd overall in the Chicago Mac and sponsored the Chicago Mac, and so we've had good results in all 3 races.
Is the rest of the summer now set for cruising just around that western part of the lake, or are there races left?
Actually, my boat will be in Duluth racing, but I'm going to be helping deliver a 59-foot sailboat that left Duluth today. And Wednesday night, I'll be meeting them in Sault Ste. Marie, and we'll be delivering to Buffalo. And then they'll have some canal pros take it down to New York, and perhaps after that, I'll be on the boat pushing it down to Florida.
What's the boat?
It's a Jeanneau 59, and it's owned by a fellow racer named Greg Nuss, and this is his cruising boat.
Nice to have 2 of them, right?
Yeah, exactly. I'd like to have 2, but I can't afford it.
What's right behind you? Is that a copy of the trophy that you just won?
The silver one inside the case. That's the Barthel Trophy.
Right.
Or no, not the Barthel. That's the Bagley Trophy.
Okay.
And the Bagley Trophy is for the best finished Duluth Yacht Club boat.
Okay.
And I don't know how this has happened, but we've held that trophy since 1997. Every other year.
trophy that you won has been around since 1933. Since 2002, it's been as part of the challenge between the three lake associations.
Yep.
But what's really cool is your name goes in it goes on it forever. I can't even say the word. It goes on it forever, and or as long as they run the race. So that's a great accomplishment.
Oh, yeah. I mean, going in, I hadn't paid attention at all to overall numbers. And one of my crew had mentioned that, after the second race, that he thought we might be in the hunt. And I didn't even take it to heart. I mean, 35-foot boats don't win these races. So I was really surprised, especially since we finished Tuesday like 11 o'clock, and the awards for this trophy are at 3 o'clock. And we'd had a couple cocktails, and one of my crew came back from the ready room and said, "Hey, we got to be at the Kitchigami Club at 3 o'clock." And I'm going, "What?" And then I started thinking, well, that's the Barthel. And why would then I started thinking, well, maybe we did win it. So we all showed up in our Zubas, and you've probably seen some pictures with our Zubas on. And I really hadn't planned on it, hadn't thought about it. And one of the crew members on Stripe says, we were upset that we didn't get it, but if we can't have it, we're really glad you got it.
Well, sometimes victories come in all kinds of reasons. And I think with the handicap, it was something about 75, 78 minutes. Does that sound about right?
Yeah, it did. It's I mean, really over all the hours of all three of those races, that's not a very long time.
Well, and again, I'll use the analogy of a Wolverine who belongs to Bayview was beaten by somebody other than, and I'm a Crescent, Michigan State guy. Crescent's just down the street from Bayview here in Detroit. So sitting on the back of the boat, the beer tasted a little colder yesterday. having found this out after we talked to Stacy. So I just think it's terrific, and I want to congratulate you, and I really appreciate you taking a few minutes out to spend some time with us.
Oh, absolutely. And I can't thank enough the people that sailed with me, and
give me their names. Give me all their names.
Okay, I'm gonna have to pull up a document to get
That's
that
fine.
for you.
You don't know your daughter's names?
No, I know them, but we had different people on different races. So
I understand.
I got to go to Google here.
No, that's fine.
Actually, I don't even have to do that. I can go here, and I can go here. And my daughter did up a little thing for me with all the stuff on it. So
that's cool.
Yeah. Crew for race and deliveries. Okay, there it is. And yeah, you probably can't see my screen.
No.
Okay. I will try to minimize this if I can.
Well, just tell me who they were.
Okay. In the Chicago to Mac was Keith Strauber, Bob Boynton, who's my best friend from Duluth and drives my boat all the time in our local races. Jerry Gavin didn't make it. He was supposed to. He's a former North sales guy, but is now 79 years old, and he just couldn't get around the boat well enough, so he didn't want to go. Myra Strauber, Madeline Strauber, Lars Benson, Ryder Munson, who's a former Lake Superior sailor now living in Texas, and Wes Orey, who's a fellow from Kansas City that I met curling. And let's see, there was one more on the race, Paul Barnes, who isn't on the list. And Paul Barnes is a friend of mine's son from Chicago. I'm on the Lake Michigan PHRF Council, and Tom Barnes, good friend, and his son came with us and was a really valuable asset. And he's a sailing instructor in Texas as
That's
well.
cool. Well, Keith, listen,
Okay.
to you and your daughters, congratulations.
Okay, did you want to hear the Bayview?
Oh,
and
yeah.
Frank?
Give me
Yeah.
the rest of them.
Okay, Bayview Mac was Keith Strauber, Bob Boynton, Dave Crum, who's a fellow that has a 46-footer down in Antigua, friend from up on Lake Superior here. And we had Myra no, Myra didn't go on the Bayview, and actually Myra didn't go on the Chicago Mac either. And Lars Benson, and then Tim Jones.
And Trans-Pacific. Trans-Pacific.
Trans-Superior, yeah. That was Audra Erkelenz, who's a gal that's done 2 of the trances with us from Duluth, and myself, and Jed Lottie, who's a friend from Duluth and a curling friend as well, Myra and Madeline, Lars Benson, Mike Myers, another longtime sailing friend from Duluth, Tim Jones, and Wes Ori.
That's the word I was trying to say earlier was interpretude. That was the word I was trying to say. So between Trans-Pacific and Trans-Superior, at least I got interpretude correctly at the end of the interview. Oh,
Exactly.
listen, I can't tell you how much I appreciate you talking to you, and congratulations, and have what's the rest of the summer, have what's left of it, have a great one. That was Keith talking a little bit about the race and his daughters, and I think you will agree that it was a really cool deal. Coming up is Chuck Beyer, who is Arctos skipper. They're second place in the Trans-Superior, and had a great race. Talk a little bit about the race, Lake Superior, and all that goes into campaigning a boat for all 3 of the big races. So we'll be back with him in a second. Welcome back to segment 2. We're talking with Chuck Beyer, who is the owner of Arctos, and just finished the Transpac, which is a long race from Sault Ste. Marie all the way to Duluth, Minnesota. A race run every couple of years. You guys were second overall. And I guess I just want to start with the easiest of questions. Talk a little bit about the race.
Well, this is probably my 5th Trans-Superior race. The last 2 I've done on my own boat. 2 years ago, we got line honors, and we were hoping for that again. Both 2 years ago and this year were what I will call unusual wind conditions for the race. It was very warm. I mean, unseasonably warm and unseasonably light air. I don't think we had a heavy one up the entire race.
Yeah.
So it was all kites and light ones and drifters. So it was not a typical Trans-Superior race where you can get some decent breeze out of the west.
What is the allure of Lake Superior as compared to maybe the Mac Chicago or even the Bayview to Port Huron to Mac?
I think it is a longer race by 25 or 30% longer. It's a natural race course in that there's been traffic going from the Sioux to Duluth for hundreds of years.
Right.
The conditions, you're fairly remote. If you can get up around where Isle Royale is, which is on the western half of Lake Superior, and you get up there, there is not much to be seen in terms of people, or
Right.
You see a ore freighter once in a while, but it's an extremely desolate place in the world, I would say, that we actually race in. The latitude is pretty high, and it makes wind change more frequently. I've sailed in Helsinki, and it's cold there, but it's also pretty cold in Trans-Superior. The water temperature, doesn't get much above 40 degrees, even in the summer, if you're a foot below the surface. So it's a fairly challenging race course, much more so than the other 2 from a physical and in the environment.
I know Lake Superior fairly well. I grew up in the summer times. My family is from Marquette, so I spent a lot of time in the lake swimming, and or in this case, wading, not going too deep because you didn't spend a whole lot of time in the lake. I mean, average temperature, I think, in the summertime is something in the 55 range, 55 degrees. If a prevailing wind is typical on Lake Superior for a race like this, it's a horizontal lake as compared to the other lakes, which are vertical. So this tends to be, I would think, more beam reach, that kind of thing, or does you get all conditions in this race?
Well, I'm out of the 5 that I've done, I've seen all sorts of conditions. The last 2, which I've done as a skipper of my own boat, I don't think are typical.
Okay.
The wind, the prevailing wind is coming out of the west northwest. That's where all the different, highs and lows and fronts are coming from, and they come fairly quickly. They're because of the latitude. I think the storms are traveling faster. The different features. This year we had a big high that sort of sat over the whole lake, and I don't think we saw. If we saw 14 knots of breeze, that would have been a lot this race.
Yeah. Lakes, I have no meteorological understanding of Lake Superior, but I would think that it can get much nastier than either Michigan or Huron. Again, I don't have any, just based on heritage and history and tale, is the allure because it is Superior. It's just one of those places you got to go just to try it. And the other thing is that doesn't seem to get the crowd. It gets a lot of there's a lot of the 70s, Santa Cruz's and Andrews, and we'll talk about that. But I'm surprised there's only 35 boats as compared to, a couple of hundred for the other races. It's just because of the remoteness.
The locations where you start and finish don't have a huge amount of capacity. I think they were talking about limiting the numbers. The Duluth Yacht Club, which is a sponsor, had sent out some emails about dockage when you get to Duluth. They don't have, the facilities that the Mackinac area have or that Port Huron has or Chicago. Number 2 is it's a fair commute to deliver the boat there and to deliver it home. It's a long way from anywhere. And unless you're a bigger boat, like a 70, where you can motor at 9 and 10 knots, it takes you a fair amount of time to get there.
Right.
Delivering the boat back 300, 400 miles just to get back to civilization and get through the locks and come down to the St. Mary's River to get back into the lower Great Lakes, that can take, 3-4 days with a crew of 4 or 5. You don't want to go out in Lake Superior with 1 or 2 people trying to deliver the boat because the storms can pop up quickly.
What's the best part of the lake to sail around? What do you enjoy the most on that lake? Is there a part of the lake that's nicer than others?
Well, after the start, you basically are beating out of Whitefish Bay, and coming into Whitefish Point is a turning point in the race. And that's basically everyone turns there. It's a natural mark. The run line is fairly close to shore. No one wants to be 5 miles out because you're just traveling more distance. So that's sort of a pretty neat feature, tacking. It's generally been tacking out of Whitefish Bay to Whitefish Point. And then the Apostle Islands on the other end are sometimes pretty nice. You don't necessarily get too close to them because the wind can be a little tricky down by the Apostle Islands, but it's just beautiful, beautiful country.
You see the pictured rocks. We see Lake Superior, some of the stuff sliding into the lake. We see some of the parts of the lake changing. When the breeze comes up on Lake Superior, it can be treacherous. It can be very treacherous. I would think once you're past the Keweenaw and you're kind of coming downhill into Duluth, I would think that would be a little bit easier. Or is that the harder part of the lake?
Well, 2 years ago, when we were probably due south of Isle Royale, a front came through with about 60 knots of wind for 20 minutes. And, that can be pretty challenging. You always get squalls in
Right.
Lake Michigan or Lake Huron, but this one was particularly long lasting to have a 15 or 20 minute sustained breeze at that level. And, basically we ended up going bareheaded. Trying to reef in 60 knots on a 70 footer is a tough deal. So I made a change from 2 years ago when we put cars on the left track. So basically we can drop the main, because if you start dropping the main on a 70 footer in that kind of breeze and you got a main flopping around on the deck, it's not a very safe situation. So having cars helped to reef, but I don't think I have the experience in Lake Superior to sort of say what's normal.
Right.
5 races doesn't make me a local expert by any means.
I don't know of anybody that's written a song about a boat crashing as the Edmund Fitzgerald did. They did in Superior, but I don't think there's any songs that I'm aware of either in Michigan or Huron. Plenty of boats have sunk in both those lakes, but I think it comes with a bit of a reputation. Explain a little bit about the name of the boat, Arctos. You mentioned that it's well, go ahead, explain it. I'll let you better than I.
As you asked for the pronunciation of my last name, the way it's spelled like Bear Aspen, so everyone calls me Bear. And based upon that, I kind of played it up. So most of my boats have had a bear theme.
Okay.
So I had a 36 Beneteau 36.7 called Grizzly. Before that, I grew up with my dad on a Cal 36 called Old Bear. I have a power boat called Ursa Major, which is the constellation, the big bear. Arctos is the guardian of the bear, and it's a constellation. Arcturus is a constellation just below the Big Dipper and the Little Dipper. And the mythology of it is that it's guarding the 2 baby bears. My son came up with the name, and Arcturus is one of the, I think it's 57 navigational stars. It's one of the brightest in the sky. I think it may even be, the top 1 or 2, and it's just below the Big Dipper. So that's where it came from.
Talk briefly. Our 70s have captured our imagination because there's such beautiful boats going by, certainly on Lake St. Clair. And those they've had a run, a really competitive run for, I guess, 22 years, 25 years. I think the TP52s have kind of came along in just a different class, but there's a Santa Cruz 70 and there's an Andrews 70. Is there much difference? And I guess for those who don't know, is this a Formula One? Is this a real true one design, or are they the same kind of boat? And what's the difference between those Santa Cruzes and the Andrews?
Originally 25 years ago, when they were first designed, they were all pretty much identical, but over the years they've changed. In fact, my boat has had a new keel. Most of them have had chain plates moved inboard so they can trim the head sails at a narrower sheeting angle. Boats weigh differently, but the fundamental length, size, waterline, height of the rig, J, the I, the E are all pretty much identical. My boat in California under perf rates almost identical to most of the Santa Cruzes out there, which were developed as sleds to go downwind.
Right.
When they came to the Great Lakes, and there's a Great Lakes 70 class, the boats were modified to be able to go upwind and sail in lighter breeze. So they got bigger head sails, and my boat under IRC or ORR, or now ORC, I give the Santa Cruzes a fair amount of time, but I put some bigger sails on my boat. So to have won the Mackinac races, I have to beat a Santa Cruz 70 by a couple hours.
Okay. Where's Andrews? Where are they built, Andrews? I know some of them were built in Estonia, but where was yours built?
I think it was called Dencho Marine, and it's in California.
Okay. The reason I was asking the question, I lived in California a long time in the San Diego area. So anything with a Santa Cruz, if you know anything about West Coast boats, it's all about downhill, and everything is raced towards Mexico. It's just kind of the way it runs. So that's why I was curious, but there is modifications as there is anything else for an area. You didn't have great races, either Chicago or the Mac Bayview race, but you had obviously second place. That's gotta be a great way to end the summer.
Well, the Chicago race was quite disappointing. We were way in the lead. One of the TP52s, Vesper and Mockingbird and us went into
Sure.
the Sleeping Bear Dunes, and we stopped.
Yeah.
And we stopped for 6 hours going under 2 knots, and the tracker changes the scheme because we were Natalie J, which ultimately won they were 15 miles behind us.
Right.
And, they could see us on the tracker stop, and they turned left and went around us. Boats 5 or 6 miles further offshore were doing 8 knots for an entire watch. And we were doing under 2. So, I mean, that's 25 or 30 miles they put on us in, 4 or 5 hours.
A couple of weeks ago, we interviewed Bob Hughes, and he lives in Holland. So while we were watching the tracker, I thought he had quit the race because it was headed right to Holland. And I'm thinking he's headed right back to Makatawa. There must be something wrong with the boat. But he obviously recovered and he did the rest of them. It's just a curiosity. Were you surprised Eagle 1 was that far ahead? Or is that just one of those lucky you catch the breeze?
Well, first of all, Eagle 1 started a day ahead of everybody because they're in the cruising class.
No, I get that.
That's one of the reasons. I actually lost a bet to Tim LaRiviera. I had bet him boat for boat who was going to finish first, knowing full well that I was going to spot him a day.
Right.
But the breeze didn't really shut down. So he had already gotten up to the Manitous by the time we started.
Right.
So he had gotten quite a jump on us, and then it was a fairly light air race. So we didn't have enough runway to catch him.
I thought it was interesting that he said when we interviewed him, he talked about coming across the finish line at 1 or 2 or 3 in the morning and still had power boats in the marina, which is never the case because they all leave the next morning. It has been such a fast race. And here you come across the line first and you want the big celebration, and then there's nobody to celebrate with. So they had to go to bed and get up and wait for everybody to come in to, sort of enjoy the victory, as it were.
Well, I had a drink with Tim on Mackinac after the Chicago race, but he had finished, gone home, and come back before. So he had already gone back to Detroit, did some work, and came back for the awards, and that's how far ahead he was, and before everybody else in the awards. He finished Sunday, sometime early Sunday, very early Sunday morning, I think.
An inside baseball question. We happened to come up for Friday night to come to the Port Huron Yacht Club to go to the party, and we noticed your boat was in a cradle on Friday night on the south side of the river, and you're always wondering what happened because you see those kinds of boats they're pretty easily noticed. And from what I understand, you lost your sail drive coming back from the Chicago race to Port Huron. Talk us through the emergency kind of thing that a lot of people don't maybe see that happens to a skipper like yourself in that situation.
Well, it was maybe 35 miles north of Port Huron. It was pretty flat. I was not aboard, but I got the phone call that they had no engine and there was no air. So it was fairly flat calm, but we weren't going to be able to start the race without an engine. It's just not safe.
Right.
So basically my whole team, and kudos to my captain, Tim LeBute, who's a Canadian, and they scrambled, and some of my crew were able to find the location of a sail drive. We had it, emergency delivered, trying to find a place to haul the boat, but Desmond Marine came through. We actually store with Desmond in the winter, so we had a little bit of pull. So we've been using them is our local boat yard. There's not a lot of places that can haul a boat that draws 12 feet.
Right.
They were able to scramble, change their schedule, haul us out, and we got some mechanics and basically rebuilt the engine, pulled the sail drive out, put a new one in, all in about 24 hours so we could make the start. Getting the boat to Port Huron was somewhat of a challenge because now it's out in the middle of Lake Huron, and sea tow would not go out to get it until we were within 25 miles. So basically, we sent out another boat that went out and towed it in, and was probably 4 to 6 hours from the time we got the call to the time the boat was in the slings at Desmond. So it was quite a we won just by making it to the start in that race.
Dumb question, answer or don't answer, but I don't want to get nosy, but is that a 4-figure or a 5-figure 24-hour fix dollar wise?
It was expensive.
Okay. Yeah. Something was, I'm guessing, not in the budget.
No, it was not expected at all. But the sail drive was these boats are fairly old, although they're ultralight technology and there's not a lot in them, so that they've remained competitive over the years. Some of the parts are getting fairly old, and the sail drive was an original on the boat.
Okay.
It was just lucky we could get one to replace it. It was Yanmar, so Yanmar is a pretty good engine.
I've got one in my sailboat. I love it dearly. A couple last questions, and this just hit me as we're talking about the fix of the sail drive. When you sit down at the end of the season to figure out your budget next year, is there contingency money built in for a budget that you know that there's going to be a disaster somewhere along the line? Is that something you plan for?
Well, you never plan on any particular disaster, but on a sailboat like this, sails rip,
Right.
Hardware breaks, electronics go out, all sorts of things happen all the time. So the repair and maintenance is, as everyone knows, a sailboat's a hole in the water in which you throw money, and the operating cost of these boats, is the real big number, not the purchase price of the boat. The boats are fairly inexpensive compared to the cost of operating them.
Last question. It goes back to the Trans-Superior race. There's a trophy. I think it's the Bethard, if I'm not mistaken. Barthel, which is just explain what that is.
Well, it's a beautiful trophy. It's sterling silver. I just saw it a few days ago when I was up there. I was hoping to win it, but because there's some pretty famous boats whose names on it, and it's quite a prestigious award. The two Mackinac races plus the Trans-Superior, boats that do the best combined score of those 3 races win the trophy. In this year, I believe it was Papagacho.
Okay.
I'm not sure who actually won it. Bruce Akins, who has a boat called Talisman, won it 2 years ago. Think of a famous Great Lakes boat and their names on it. So,
I find it interesting, and having done this series over the last couple of years, we always talk about the Stanley Cup being the oldest trophy in North America. Turns out the Queen's Cup, there's a variety of cups around sailing that are much older than any of the part of the Stanley Cup, but doesn't get the recognition because obviously it doesn't have the publicity that the National Hockey League has. But it's been really fun uncovering, so that there's really some of these trophies have really interesting stories in the history. I mean, the Queen's Cup was in a guy's garage for 35 years, because he didn't know what to do with it. It has some really cool lore to it.
The trophies, if you go into any of these yacht clubs, whether it's the Duluth Yacht Club, Chicago Yacht Club, or Bayview Yacht Club, and you look at the trophy cases, many of them are sterling silver, nicely polished, and the names go back over 100 years.
Right.
And I think that's one of the things you race to put your name down in memorial. so that once you've won, that your boat and your name is on the trophy for posterity. So I think that's one of the allures of racing. You sure don't do it for, money or, the little flag. You do it for the flag to fly while you're, cruising around. But the real thing is to get your name on the trophies.
What's left for the summer of the bod race, I would think, coming up?
Yeah, the bod race, I don't think there's going to be a class for the bigger boats. There's we could get 5 or 6, but I think the minimum class size they want are 8 boats. So I'm going to race on somebody else in the bod. And there's I race on other people's boats as much as I race on my own.
And again, I guess when I have these conversations, when you're a skipper, you have a certain way of dealing with people on your boat. As a crew member, do you learn something from other skippers, or is it pretty much the same? You won't sail with anybody that doesn't sort of act like you, because there are some skippers that can be a little interesting in the way they approach sailing, put it that way.
Well, I've always wanted to, and I will maintain sailing on other people's boats, because you always learn something from everybody.
Right.
I mean, even the worst skipper with the worst performance, you can learn something from, because they're very good at, dealing with the crew, or they cater the boat well, or everybody's got their strengths, and you can always learn something from sailing with other people. And the skippers that don't do that, they get, sort of set in their own ways, and they stop progressing. So you never stop learning by just keep sailing with a bunch of other people.
Yeah, for sure. Well, listen, congratulations on a great Trans-Superior. I appreciate your time. And if you get to the bod, if there's enough boats, good luck with that race as well.
Well, I'm going to race the bod. I just don't know if it's going to be on a Cal 25 or Beneteau, or they have a couple of Warhorse or Perf divisions. So
You'll be in the race.
Sail. Yes.
Appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Just wanted to thank my guests this week, Dave Johnson, Stacy McKenzie, Keith Strauber, and as well as Chuck Byer, and for talking about the Trans-Superior. It was a really fun show to put together, because the stories and you just tell by their personalities. This is a good group of folk. We really had a good time talking with them, and we'll hopefully be back soon. We'll check with you next week. We've got the upcoming, we'll talk with the folks at Bayview about the upcoming bod, and talk a little bit about what fall sailing is. And so for everybody in back, this is Greg Norman. Have a good week.